things that are exciting in that field?
Well, yeah, of course, but I don't know them. I actually don't do research.
Okay.
But yeah, they're doing all sorts of things all the time. But it's it's super abstract, and what you do in math is maybe useful. 15, 20 years later. Like Andrew Wiles, proved FAMAS last year. He had developed a whole field of mathematics. It's like a 1,000-page proof. Yeah, nice to meet you. And then some of it's being used. Jim Simon, I mean, he was quantum $23 billion.
Interesting. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right, you sound like a president. When you say we'd like this candle. Yeah, okay, good deal. This week, the EV situation was funny, so we're just going to do this instead. Welcome, everybody, to the 136th episode of Silicon Zombies, where we bring you the best brains from the day to beyond. We're super psyched to talk a little bit about different funding instruments and how we can leverage these different channels to grow and bring community together. So we've got some wonderful brains in the house. So let's take a couple quick moments and start off with Stephen and team. So Stephen, please kick us off.
Good intro?
Yeah, that'd be super.
My name is Stephen Kuhn. I am the founding partner of Advantary Capital Partners. We are a investment firm, stage agnostic, sector agnostic, as well as a consulting group as well. So what's a little unusual about us is that an early stage investor, we have both a investment arm, but what's unusual is having 25 or so operating partners in an early stage venture. So anyway, more about us.
Deep world expertise.
Yeah, there you go.
Roger Royse, please.
Roger, I'm a lawyer with Haynes and Boone, right next door, by 25 Kuhn Estate. I do emerging growth and venture capital. Startups, small tech startups. Also, I've got a book out recently called 10,000 Startups, Strategies for Success, and a card right there by the door that you can pick up on your way out. And you can have a copy of that book if you go to Amazon and buy one. So, thanks.
But Roger will sign it for you.
Absolutely.
No such thing as a free lunch. Hi, everybody. I'm Vrinda Agarwal, based in San Francisco. I'm an investor at a fund called PennJar Capital. We are a first fund kicked off in 2021. Our anchor LP is Steph Curry, the NBA player, and we have other institutional capital as well. Have our first close for our second fund this week, so wish us luck. We are early stage B2B generalists, so pre-seed through Series A is really the sweet spot for us. I've been investing at the early stage for the last 5 years now across a number of different funds. My background is in investment banking, and then I spent a few years working at Google on the Nest Labs team in product strategy.
Troy Helming, I'm representing founders. I'm the founder and CEO of EarthGrid. EarthGrid is company number 8 for me. I've had 1 failure, 6 exits, 4 meaningful, and depending on how you count it, 1 or 2 unicorns. So excited to be here. And fundraising, even my track record, you would think it'd be easy, but fundraising is hard.
So it sounds like there's some experience there. Maybe you want to kick us off, Steve.
Sure. Well, let's step right into that. So my background, I am a 10-time entrepreneur. Advantary is my 10th company. 8 are or were in the tech space. 1 was a boutique technology investment bank. So I've been a FINRA 763 and 24 for those of you who know what that government means. And the last company was a private equity group in the wine industry. There's a special place in hell for raising capital. It's hard work. It beats you down. There is, you got to be ready to be kicked in the butt a lot. and be resilient, which any entrepreneur who's not resilient should rethink the path they're on. It's hard work, and I've raised a lot of capital for myself. I've raised it for other people, and it's not for everybody. And that's why we at Advantary, we don't raise capital for people, we invest. And we're happy to talk to you about that as well as we move forward in the conversation.
Right. And it sounds like the space is changing. Just like technology, there are new vehicles to help entrepreneurs and founders get to where they're going. So let's maybe dive into that a little bit. Roger, what have you seen in that specific space that's maybe kind of tip of the spear? Or maybe we could demystify what some of these vehicles look like.
Maybe you could demystify it for me. When you say new vehicles, you mean different types of offerings or different types of
Sure.
financing?
Sure. So there's crowdfunding.
Okay, that's what I
there's all
thought
sorts
you
of
meant.
different
Yeah,
directions we could go.
So there was a time, going back to the beginning of time when I started law in this valley, where you went out for venture capital and you didn't do financing. This was a pretty big event. And it was hard to do, and it was a lot more rare than it is now. And it was big dollars and fewer rounds. And now money's just so much easier to come by because we've got pre-seed, seed, we've got angel groups online VCs, online angels. But what you just said about crowdfunding is really significant because that in 2012, I guess, was the Jobs Act, when we had two major changes that really changed everything about my practice and about the way it started to fund it. If you look back on it. And one was the idea that you could go online and publicly solicit money for a private company.
Unregistered securities.
Yeah, as long as you could verify that all your investors were accredited. You think about that. That's huge. You know, since 1933, the law has been you could not publicly solicit. As of 2012, you can skywrite, you can take out billboards, you can go through a phone book and call people, you know, you can do all this stuff. And
What's the phone?
it was funny, my daughter told me that when I asked her about a phone book, and she said, "There's a book about phones?" I'm in the phone. But you get the idea, and that's good because you can go online and tell people, look, we're raising money. And then the second thing is what you said, crowdfunding, Greg Sita funding. We raise up to $5 million now through a public portal in small, itsy bitsy tiny amounts. And when that first came along, you know, all the lawyers, you know, just went crazy hearing about this, that we're going to take, companies can now take money from widows and orphans or whatever, and it would be the death of, you know, I guess, the industry. But it's been a very successful thing. A lot of companies have done very well getting that start with affinity investors, with customers, with a product that people can kind of get and are willing to throw $1,000, $2,000 at. And the later rounds, the VCs, I have found, haven't been that afraid of it either. They're like, oh, so you did a crowd financing. You know, that's okay, we'll still finance you.
Well, perhaps there's some pros and cons to that. Vrinda, when you see crowdfunding on the cap table, is this something that you have a particular feeling about one way or the other?
Not necessarily. I mean, it can send a certain signal. Like one of the signals that it could send is that maybe you weren't able to raise a traditional round, and so you kind of dig into why you went that approach. I think another thing is you probably haven't had kind of a strong anchor investor. It's almost like the same way that we think about party rounds, or if you're raising $1 million and you have, you know, $10,000, $100,000 checks versus one $750K check and then like some smaller angels. We usually see it more favorably if you have that kind of one investor who has been guiding you, especially if it's an investor that we, you know, think highly of. But that said, I don't think we ding founders for doing any kind of crowdfunded rounds, especially if they're still very early in the game, if they're building something contrarian, and actually sometimes see that other thing.
Those party rounds sound so fun.
It gets in the name.
We've got a couple of companies early stage that we're investing in alongside their crowdfunding.
Let me throw a caution out there. That's true if this is successful.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing worse than failing. Because now that's out there. Public can see it.
It's almost a death.
Yeah, I've actually seen some of that. So EarthGrid, we started the company 8 years ago. I bootstrapped it for the first 5 years, significant capital from our family office, and then we raised a pre-seed round, didn't have a lead, so we went out to angels and then a seed round. And we thought, hey, let's try crowdfunding, because I wanted to democratize ownership of energy and infrastructure. EarthGrid, plasma, tunnel boring robots, think lightsabers on the ground to make it cheaper to bore tunnels. Anyway, and solving the power problem for data centers and burying the power lines for PG&E that are killing people, causing fires. Anyway, so I'm like, let's try crowdfunding. And so we launched on that capital, and it was slowly. I was like, oh boy, it's a death knell. It's not going to happen. And then we realized, hey, we should maybe promote it a little bit. Because you don't just publish out there, put it out there, and all of a sudden the money pours in. So we started promoting it, and we were getting anywhere from a 3 to 5 ROAS, so return on ad spend. Anyway, so for the founders in the room, if they're going to explore it, what we liked about it is it's one entry on the cap table, right? And it's common stock. So, okay, that's cool. We ended up raising about $3.3 million last year on that crowdfunding campaign. And then we did it again this year. We're doing the seed extension. We only had the crowdfunding open for a little while, and we raised another 1.2. So $4.5 million total in just over 12 months, which is almost to that $5 million cap. So it worked. That's part of about $49 million that we raised in total.
But what you hear about that is a strategy, right? A strategy to make sure that it does work.
Yeah.
It's not a build it and they will come.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And so we would reinvest in that first round. We reinvested 20% of all the investment that came in, and we put it into ads. And for every dollar we spent on ads, we were getting $3 to $5 of investment. And some weeks it was $8 or $10 or $12 in investment, higher return on ad spend. And we figured out with a marketing agency which ads work best. Spend too much time on this, but at least for us it was successful. But you have to put time and effort into it.
Yeah. And I think we'll definitely hold some time for questions at the end. I appreciate that. And it likely helped that you had something of a public persona as well. So maybe could we kind of address you and have you talk about Ninja Warrior Championship real quickly?
Okay, yeah. So my son, who's now almost 17, 5 years ago or so, saw American Ninja Warrior on TV after swim practice. And I was a gymnast in college, rock climber off and on, and yoga for 30 years. I was like, I can do that. So I went out to a ninja gym in Concord, tried it out, and threw out my back, hurt my shoulder, limping home, but it made me so mad that I wanted to go back and do it because I'm competitive, right? So I kept going back. Anyway, they invited me to be on the show, American Ninja Warrior, 4 times. So I've competed on there. I've hit some buzzers in Australia, and just did a buzzer this summer at the World Championships, which is not for sure. But anyway, so being an athlete helps, at least for me, helps give me the energy to put all of this time and energy into doing pitches. I've pitched so many angles. Jackie, how many pitches have I done since?
2,500.
Oh. Okay, the serial founder with 2 unicorns, or maybe 1.5, because one of the companies just fell below unicorn status. So anyway, and, that track record, and I still had to pitch over 2,000 times to raise money for my company.
Wow.
Got to put in the work.
And so maybe having something of a public persona would likely be helpful, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that, social media following is helpful, and kind of being out there, talking about, yes, I'm an athlete, but also, in the company. And so when people follow me, that social, and so then the ads, more people saw it. So yeah, that was helpful.
Oh, so that's a great strategy. So how many other American Ninja Warriors are out there? So you can follow that path. Yeah.
But you can do anything,
Yeah.
Get yourself out there on social media or whatever, and get the exposure for your company, because there is, your personal brand, if you're a founder, is tied to your company. there's no way to extricate yourself from that, right? And so it takes a little more time and investment. I don't particularly like social media, but I spend time on it anyway to get that personal brand.
Yeah. And then if we think about like what are the different terms and risks that are associated, maybe we could take a step back. Brenda, if you wanted to just give us a high level of what these different vehicles generally look like. There's of course like the friends and family round. There's like the seed stage and all the VCs and all the rest. Of course, down to private equity as well. So maybe to kind of set the table for the folks at home and the folks in the audience, maybe you could kind of give us a high level on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say usually, startups will kick off with a friends and family round, maybe bring in some strategic angels. We usually see this at somewhere between like 200K to 500K. That's your first kind of round in. You're pulling in people that you're pulling in people who have worked in the industry, who are writing either angel or super angel checks. Pre-seed is really where we come in, and that's a round that starts at something like $1 million in a raise. Valuations can really depend, especially now in this crazy world of AI. But I would say pre-seed valuations anywhere in the valley, I've been seeing kind of between like a $5 to $8 million post, maybe 5 to 10. Again, depending on kind of founder's background, what you're building, what your traction is. Next is your seed round. So you're usually raising something between like a 2 to 4, 2 to 5 million. You're usually diluting yourself about anywhere between 10 to 20%, average being really the middle of that, so 15%. And then kind of a step up to Series A, which is kind of starting to be early growth, plus onwards there. And I would say in terms of kind of traction that we're looking for, at least on the PennJar side, so pre-seed, you usually have your founders, you're building in a large market, and you maybe have an MVP with some design partners. Obviously, the more traction you can have, the better, and the higher valuation you'll command. Seed, we really start looking for at least 100K in ARR, and some kind of early signs of product market fit. And I would say starting kind of at the Series A's where we're looking for $1 million plus in ARR, so having just more of that significant traction.
Can we just dig into the ARR term, which is bandied about so much these days?
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between trailing 12-month and ARR. A lot of people talk about their ARR, and they're really talking about their trailing 12-month revenue or last year's revenue. And if you're trending up, obviously your ARR if you're annualizing based on the last quarter or the last month even, is going to be in excess of your trailing 12-month. And so when I hear people talk about ARR, they're usually not actually talking about ARR. They're talking about their trailing 12 months. So just a little minor pet peeve of mine when people are not clear about what their revenues are.
And on that, do you also look for year-over-year revenue increases every year?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think, VCs generally have that hockey stick that they're looking for, the T2, D3, triple, double, kind of over each year. And that's kind of the go-to thinking around kind of growth for a company, for companies that make it to $100 million in top line. Obviously, every company's journey is very different. We've had some very successful portfolio companies that have not followed that journey in a way that they've had less growth. We've had some companies that have exceeded that, but maybe plateaued at a certain point. But I would say that's just kind of the T2, D3 is just a rule of thumb.
Vrinda, you mentioned PennJar is the name of the fund. That's a pretty wonderful story. Can you share us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a fun kind of quirky name. I remember when I was first interviewing for the fund, I had a lot of questions about the name of the reason, but essentially, as I mentioned, that Stephen Curry, the NBA player, is our anchor LP. And one of our founding partners, Bryant Barr, played college basketball with Stephen at Davidson, so they were teammates and roommates. And not to knock Davidson, but at this time they weren't like a massive basketball powerhouse or anything. You kind of had your, top 4, top 8 contenders every year that would be in your Elite 8. But that year specifically, in which they made it to the Elite 8, their coach put a giant penny jar in their locker room, and all the players looked at it kind of questioningly. But at the end of every successful team practice, so not as individuals, but as a team, if they collaborated well together and showed just team spirit and, they were working well together, They would each get a penny from their coach, and they would be able to put that penny in the penny jar. But it was either nobody on the team gets a penny or everybody gets a penny after the practice. And so obviously initially it was filling up very, very slowly. But by the end of the season, when they made it to the Elite Eight and were, in the kind of contention to be champions, they looked back at this penny jar and looked at, it was all full. And it was great inspiration for them to be able to think back to all of their team practices where they worked so hard as a team. And so we have that same ethos at Penny Jar, where for our founders, even if it's small efforts every day, we really believe in dropping those pennies in the jar for our portfolio companies. Even the smallest actions, can add up to really meaning a lot. And we've really seen that kind of effort over time as well. And so that's our ethos when it comes to really everything that we do at Penny Jar.
Yeah, speaking of pennies in the jar, how are you thinking about this, Roger, from a legal perspective? There's a bunch of different vehicles that startups can use. Obviously, you want to be strategically valuable from an investor perspective. How are you thinking about this?
Any type of entity?
Yeah, that and just strategic support to the portfolio companies.
Yeah, well, the type of entity that's easy. It's still a receipt these days, so you can issue qualified small business stock. And don't get me started on that. We can talk for an hour. But that is a huge giveaway in the tax code. I'm sure everybody here is very familiar with it. It's the ability to exclude up to $10 million or 10 times the cost from any federal income tax at all. And I gotta tell you, I have VC clients that live in states like Nevada and Texas that are in a tax haven. They pay no state and no federal income tax because they're in a state that doesn't tax, and all of their income is QSBS. So it's a really huge benefit, and it's on the chopping block every session. Biden has been trying to get rid of it. As long as I can remember, it's ingrained in the tax code. So, but the reason I said all that is because in order to get that benefit that investors really, really covet, you got to be a C corporation. So it's under that start. So that's kind of very technical legal stuff.
That's partly why we're here, though.
Yeah. The more interesting thing, though, is just what are the metrics, to get the money. And you said a mouthful just now, by the way, when you described the tables you were talking. There's a lot of questions like, what is traction? Does a company have to have revenue? What if it's just a proof of concept? How do you make those decisions? Because a lot of the companies I see, I look at startups, a lot of them, they're not there yet. They're not doing 2 times year-over-year revenue. They haven't even been around that long, but they still need to boost money in. And the question is, what is an investor going to like if I don't have those big revenue numbers? And that's the question that we're all wondering about. Is it the team? Is it the technology? Is it just timing? Tell me about it. Same one.
Same word. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was just riffing off your alliteration with the T's, the team, the TAM, traction. These are all really important components. Yeah.
What's the most important? Team. I knew you was going to say that. And I've been hearing that for 4 years.
Does that hesitate for more?
Not at all. And I keep hearing people say that, and until I actually did some angel investing myself, I didn't realize how ridiculously important that is, right? So that American Ninja stuff, that says a lot. I believe you're going to stay the distance with the company. And, every investor I think has been in a company where everything is just perfect, but then you've got somebody running the company that you just don't have confidence in. You don't have faith in. Or they get tired, I could tell you stories.
Or they're doing really well and they hit a bump.
Yeah.
And then they go off the rails.
Right.
Yep.
Right, they do something crazy. Enough said.
Well, Troy's round is still open if you're feeling excited.
Not for long.
I like that. Well, let's shift a little bit into strategies that founders can use on these different vehicles to spur action, because so much of it is there's like a social element, like what does everybody else think about this deal? Who else has already invested? What are the things that really get you excited where you're like, oh, I don't want to miss out? Vrinda, what are you seeing when you get to talk to prospective portfolio companies?
Yeah, I mean, I have to echo, team is definitely the most important. And I think, especially in this environment with AI accelerating technology development, I think I used to really heavily index on looking just for technical founders. And I think now I'm more heavily indexing on founders that really have the sales skills and can go out and get some design partners, can get some customers, can really sell their vision. I think part of it is just being a great storyteller. Part of it is having some unique insights into the space. Like there could be 10 people who are all approaching the same space that you're working on, but what unique insight do you have? What's your unique approach, whether that's on the product or on your go-to-market or on how you're building this team in this specific space? What is that unique insight that only you have or only very few people have that's going to drive how you're building this company? So I would say, get crisp on the storytelling aspect of things, think through what are your kind of couple of unique insights, and really have a strong understanding of how you're going to build out that team.
Can you tell us real quickly what stories have resonated with you, like when a founder came in?
Yeah, so I'll talk about a company that we invested in. So we led a seed round for a company in the dental insurance prior authorization space this spring. And there's a lot of companies that are approaching prior authorization. It's kind of a mess of a process with a lot of payers, physicians, et cetera, involved. And there's a lot of room for AI and just technology in general to make this very manual process a little bit more automated and save lots of kind of manual hours for people who are in jobs where they're already strapped for time. And so this founder, what was really interesting is, he had never actually worked in the prior authorization space before, but what he did was he went and worked at a few different dental clinics just behind the desk, getting clerical insights into what am I actually seeing in terms of prior authorizations? What actually is the key pain point here? And I think very few people actually do that. Very few people actually have those direct insights from having worked in that space. So he knew the exact kind of pain points. He knew the issues that existed with EHR systems. He knew very specifically what he was targeting when he was going to be a founder. And I think that also gave him a lot more customer empathy. So now when he goes to conferences, I think people just have immediate trust in him. So I think, when I see people kind of learning about industries in this unique way where they're actually putting themselves in that driver's seat, I give them a lot of credit.
Let me pick up on that. I do a lot of work with agriculture technology companies. It's kind of my big thing, one of my big things. And what you're talking about is just domain expertise, right? And I've seen so many companies, that said, "Oh, we're going to do ag tech because it's just so easy," and then they come to realize that agriculture is like a really complicated business. It's highly regulated, very competitive, and complicated. And the ones that have done really well,
And subject to forces outside their control.
well, so many things, yeah. And the ones that have done well they've got somebody on their team that understands that industry. And I think that's got to be true of other, like the dental company, right? Like somebody who really understood it. Spent the first 2 years talking to really smart engineers who were building gadgets that solve problems that didn't exist because they didn't understand the industry. And now looking around, it's not even the better mousetrap, as you said, that win. It's just the ones where they've got the most domain expertise.
So one of the things we look for as well in the team is resilience and coachability, because life just does not work the way you think it's going to. And what you set out to do over here, might need a 1 or 2 or 5 degree change, and it may need a complete pivot. And if the team isn't prepared to do that, if they're not resilient about it, and how they handle adversity, those are alarm bells for us.
Yeah, 100%. I think grittiness is a top skill we look for in founders because the vast majority of pre-seed companies that I have advised or invested in are not working on the same things at the time of their seed as they were when we first invested. And so you have to have that resilience and that coachability. We also kind of try to pressure test for this when we're going through kind of that due diligence process of if we're giving a founder feedback, which, for every single company, there's going to be pros and cons as we're assessing them. How do they respond to that feedback? Is it obviously we want a founder who is steadfast in their beliefs of what they're building, but is there kind of a level of defensiveness? Is there coachability there? And so, yeah, I think
kind of that grittiness and that ability to adapt quickly to changing environments is very important.
And you're literally in the grit. Yeah, you're in the
Creating grit, that's a byproduct. But we did have to pivot too. You know, we started out, the idea came to me thanks to a Navy SEAL who was bragging to his girlfriend in a bar here in San Francisco, actually, about how his SEAL team used to practice entering enemy ships by cutting through the side of the ship underwater with a plasma cutting torch. Yeah, it's 20,000 degrees, take your arm off. Dude, you're such a badass. Oops, can I say that? Yeah. Anyway, so I was like, I wonder if I could go through rock, because I've been building solar and wind farms for most of my career, and lack of transmission lines is the biggest challenge. But to get the equipment to do that, those plasma torches, they're more than $1 million each with all the backup equipment, very capital intensive, right? And you can't go to an equipment financing group because that stuff has such a limited market. It's not like a truck or a trailer or a transformer. So we're like, well, we can't go out and buy, 3 of them to do tunnels. So we pivoted and we said, all right, let's do excavation. With one torch, we can carve out wine caves. We can dig ditches, where you need to trench things. Big ground vaults for people moving, where they do their splices every 150 feet when they're burying their power lines. So yeah, got pivot.
Yeah, I think that the tech and the data really speaks for itself. So if you look at their closest competitor, which is the Boring Company by Elon Musk, it costs 10 times more than your solution, and it's 10 times slower. So I mean, when you have these kinds of differentiators, it can make a very compelling story. But however, to your point about the total available market, Stephen, it's like the market is huge, but it's really kind of unknown in how you tap into it. In fact, Sam Altman talks a lot about the total available future market, because you're kind of creating an entirely new industry, Troy. Tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about this philosophy when there's really nowhere to look ahead and you're kind of blazing your own path.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's exciting, but it's also probably been a hindrance, and because we are, blazing a new path. Like that, I'll use that. So we don't fit into a box. We're climate tech, yeah, but we're also clean energy, we're deep tech, we're robotics, we're a little bit of everything. And so finding a lead, we've never had a lead investor in any of our rounds. They've always been safes, right? Because we just haven't found a lead that has domain expertise in tunneling and in climate tech and in clean energy, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, that's been challenging, but in case you don't know, we announced an $18 billion joint venture with a sovereign wealth fund a few weeks ago to build a whole bunch of tunnels here in the U.S. To solve infrastructure challenges. But yeah, our business model is to be an underground real estate company, right? We're going to dig tunnels, dig ditches, dig caves, and we're either going to sell it for a profit or we'll keep it and lease out space. It's never really been done before.
You do geothermal?
Yeah.
Unpack a little bit about your interest in the ag tech space. Actually, 2 questions. Unpack that for us, but first, tell Steelman why people might think ag tech is something that could be easy to get into.
Well, so I started this 12 years ago as a company called Climate Corp. It sold for around $1 million, and up till then, nobody knew what ag tech was or thought about it. I think it was a thing. And at that point, all the VCs said, whoa, $1 million, and $100 size in their eyes. And so we need to be in that space. And what I came to find out is that it's really one of the last industries to become tech-enabled, I think. I mean, I'm sure there's been more since then, but at the time, that's how I viewed it. And so I did a big conference to get everybody in the same room to talk about this. And my goal is to get some farmers in the room with these inventors so they build stuff that people actually wanted to use. But it ended up being a bunch of investors. Anyway, it all worked out. Anyway, but at the time when I put these people together, I needed to get in space and I needed to get sponsors. So who do you think my sponsors were? I had people tracking me down. It wasn't anybody agriculture. It was the big tech companies in the valley. It looked like a tech conference. And I remember we're being recorded, right? So I won't tell you who. But in fact, I called an ag company in Minnesota and I said, you need to come to our conference. So why would we do that? said, we're one of the biggest food companies in the world. What's a startup going to do that we can't do? And this was a business development guy, believe it or not. But I remember talking to one of the biggest tech companies in the Valley, and they tracked me down. And they said, we really want to dominate this space because this is really the one place we have not been able to get into our software business. So I just thought it was a huge opportunity. And I come from an agricultural background. I had a little bit of understanding of that area. And I just think it's cool. I just think food production is a cool thing. So I can't remember your original question. That's how I got.
No, you answered it perfectly.
Okay.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the financing structures. I mentioned safes. If you don't mind, I'd love to, yeah. So as a founder, I've had some experience with different companies, and again, one failure. My company right before this, Christine Sun, we had a joint venture with a company that didn't work out, and there was litigation and stuff like this happens, right? And so I made the mistake though of taking on to survive and not firing fast when we had this litigation going on, tying up some of our best projects. Hire slow, fire fast. You've probably heard that. I didn't do it. And so I took money in from a lender, and it was a reputable lender. They weren't predatory or anything like that. But lenders, as opposed to raising equity, lenders have a lot of power. And when the downturn continued with the company, litigation took 18 months to settle, right? And so the lender foreclosed, and that was a very painful time. We almost lost the company. Now the company raised $250 million of equity. I still sit on the board over there, but it was a really dark time. So I just want to caution those of you who are founders. There's a number of instruments you can take. There's safes, there's convertible notes, there's a variety of debt, there's venture debt, there's equipment financing, there's non-recourse debt, there's project finance if you're in hardware or whatever, developing projects. But just be careful, be cautious, don't take debt on that could put your company out of business.
Let me add to that. And maybe my opinion might be a little different, maybe not. I don't know, we'll find out. But I always tell people that if you can borrow money, you're really not a candidate for venture capital, right? Because that means you got cash flow. That means you're not pumping everything you're making back into the company and growing it. So the company doesn't pay any income tax. You just have a big exit that's hopefully tax-free to everybody on the back end. So there's something different. If you're able to borrow money, there's something about your business structure that I don't know that you guys are going to want to get involved in. But on the other hand, a venture-backed company, that's like high risk but super high return. So if you can borrow money, I always tell people you should do that because that's going to be cheaper than actually taking equity investment because you're going to give up a whole lot more. So I think that's a little different than what you were saying. You were saying don't do that.
Well, I don't disagree. I actually think a healthy amount of debt is a good idea because it's non-dilutive and there are a lot of advantages. You just need a good lawyer to make sure the deal is done. So that if there is a downturn where that revenue stops, you don't go out of business.
Well, and it also depends what you're using the debt for. If you're going to buy equipment, buying depreciating assets with equity is a really bad idea.
Yeah, and I've been forced to do it.
Yeah,
Frustrating.
yeah. So yes, use debt appropriately and get good advice.
We do have, just so you know, we do have some debt, mostly equipment financing. But I'm just cautious with what amount and the covenants of the debt terms.
Covenants, those little pesky covenants.
Back up to the audience session.
Well, yeah, the covenants, of course, are the conditions under which you're borrowing money, and the conditions under which the bank or your lender have recourse to get their money back and then some. And I'm sure Roger can expound on this much more than I can, but careful of those covenants.
I agree. Be careful of them. I've got lots of horror stories about that. I'll just share one with you because this one, I'm always on the company side, or most often on the company side when it comes to if it's a debt deal for sure. And the one that sticks in my mind is the covenant was you're not going to change the name of your company without telling us. And this is buried on page 70, these single space documents. And my client forgot about it and they changed their name. And then the lender, they knew about it, but they didn't do it. And there's another clause in there with this thing called default interest. You know what default interest is?
I just figured it out.
Yeah. It's just exorbitant penalty interest that accrues.
Which is why they didn't tell them about it.
That's exactly, you got it, you could be a lender. So he at the end of the loan, and my guy said, thanks very much, but now we're successful, don't need your line of credit anymore. He said, oh, you're firing us as a lender, well, let me tell you about all this default interest you owe us. Yeah, so be careful with covenants. Debt deals make me nervous because there's little traps all over in those. In my experiences, like lenders are hard to work with, but the creditor, but the equity people, they make deals with you. They want you to succeed. You know, they're not just trying to get their interest return. They're trying to get you to be a great, successful company.
Lenders can be difficult to work with, but you know who's great to work with is TriNet, which is one of our sponsors. Jason Advantary, of course, and Haynes and Boone. We want to open this up to the audience here for a couple questions, but before we do that, Roger, maybe you talked a little bit about a tax-deferred exit. Maybe unpack that, and then also speak a little bit to the current political scenario where Kuhn, the chair of the FTC, has kind of put some cold water on some of the M&A markets. So what are some of the downstream effects that's happening?
Yeah, well, Lena Khan is not going to be there after this. No matter who gets elected, it's pretty much fait accompli that she's not going to be around. She's made too many enemies. Sorry to say that while we're being recorded, but I think that's pretty well known.
Yeah.
Same with our SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, who I know, but he's not going to be around either. I don't think. I think no matter what happens, we'll have a friendlier environment. And what you're talking about, the downstream M&A markets, because we're all startups here, right? We're wondering, what do we care about the price of oil in Russia? You know, what do we care about all these geopolitical things, or about what happens in antitrust regulation? Well, it does make a difference. Yeah, exactly. It makes a difference because that's going to trickle down, and that's your currency. That's who's going to be buying your company. On the tax deferred stuff, like I say, QSVS, you want to claim that exemption and guard it dearly, you know, because that will be super important for your investors and for you, the founders, and for your option holders, and for everybody. I almost feel guilty telling people about this. It is such a giveaway. Tax code. But it's there. And, you know, it's kind of funny. It came in during Clinton years. And up until maybe 5-10 years ago, I told people to be, so 10 years ago, I'd say, be super cautious about this because this is just too good to be true. Eventually, Congress is going to realize what a humongous benefit this is. They're going to take it away from you retroactively. Now I don't say that anymore. It's just not going to happen. It's too ingrained. It's not.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Rohit. So my question is from Troy. Like people in this Bay Area or the California, when you go to the investors, they are more interested into the software companies. So when you said that you have given the more than 2,500 pitches, so what are the key points apart from perseverance and persistence? What do you think that being a non-software company, what a founder or entrepreneur should have in their pitches or in their mind?
Wow, a lot to unpack there. So yeah, the universe of potential investors for a hardware company or even an industrial hardware company, which is way more expensive than typical hardware, and then deep tech on top of that, it shrinks the potential investors, right? And so we reached out to a bunch of them. Most of us ghosted, or most of them ghosted us, but the ones who who wanted to learn more, we did pitches, and we do have about, I don't know, maybe 18 VCs on our cap table right now. But the vast majority of the money we've raised has been from angels, super angels, and family offices. Most of it from family offices. And for us anyway, because we have a long-term time horizon, building a tunnel from San Francisco to LA to solve the transmission problem between Northern and Southern California, that's not going to happen in a few months. Right? And might not even happen in 7 years. So we want someone that has a longer investment time horizon, and family offices.
Most family offices are like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was a bit surprised that it seemed like the panel was had consensus that it's okay to do a crowdfunding round. I mean, some time ago that really made it prohibitive to get institutional money. How do you feel though about companies that are pursuing capital through the secondary markets? If you're at a point where you're further along, you're able to move a large block, it does affect the cap table. How do you feel the successive investors feel about it after that?
Yeah,
Can you first describe what a secondary market is as well?
yeah, so it's essentially if you're kind of getting in on the next kind of sale of the stock versus the initial sale of the stock where VCs usually play. So most VCs are not buying secondaries, are not really playing in the secondaries market. But that said, I mean, I think it entirely depends on what does your cap table look like after that round? What is the story you're trying to tell? If you have a secondary sale at a very early stage, that's going to be a massive kind of red flag for an early stage investor. That's not common. That tells a story about who you were and were not able to actually attract to your round. And so I would say at the stage that I invest in, it's kind of a no-go for us. At a later stage, and I don't invest in growth equity rounds, I think it's becoming a lot more common. I don't know if other folks have seen it more commonly or have seen kind of stigmas against or benefits of.
It's situational.
Yeah.
Yeah, for us. It's situational. It's not generally a positive, but we can overlook that depending on circumstances.
Are there certain rounds you feel more comfortable with it kind of coming in or after a certain point of traction or?
Yeah, certainly later.
Yeah, later the better.
Yeah, later is better, Series Q or something like that. But, seriously, probably it's a little concerning in an A round. B, okay, yeah, what's going on? What are the dynamics? Why are some of the shareholders, either the founders or previous investors, looking to sell it? Why are they in the secondary market?
Yeah.
And does this speak to difficulty for the company obtaining liquidity or a liquidity event? That is, do they not see this? It could be that there are a few select shareholders that have, deep personal, tragedy, something has happened and they need to sell their share. But
I have an opinion on this.
okay, go for it.
I see way more secondaries now, and usually around the meetings when they start talking about it. The founders start to get kind of antsy about that, want some liquidity. And the reason why, again, so there's a benefit to being extremely old, I guess. There was a time when
It's okay.
when startups, they expected to go public in 4 years. At least they all said that.
And now they're 11 to 16 years for exit. Right?
Yeah, I've got stock that's older than some of the people in this audience now. They're supposed to go public in 4 years. So, and your founder's sitting there like, man, when am I gonna get some money for that beach house, or whatever. So I see way more secondaries now.
My perspective is we have a lot of angel investors and of course our staff that have stock options that are vested and they want to take some chips off the table, right? So there's a little bit of pressure on the angels, and so some of them were just connecting this angel with a new angel over here and doing some private. But we've been told by some of the big investment banks and the household name investment banks that are talking to us about taking this public in a few years, that Series C is when we should do a secondary. Maybe it's B, but Series C is probably what we're thinking. But it is important. And also the QSPS, our angels are like, hey, you're going to hit the $50 million asset, within the next probably 6 months. So we have to now go do a price round to convert all of our safes to start that QSPS process.
That's right.
I guess one more perspective I can share on the venture side, I guess an exception, to the rule is thinking about emerging funds. If you're going out and you have that pressure to raise and you're like a first fund raising a second fund, you generally don't have those metrics that you have to show as a venture fund to be successful. So I've seen certain funds in situations where it becomes necessary to do secondaries to hit certain targets to raise their next fund. But again, it's usually an exception, not the rule.
Thank you. Very helpful. I'm Max from the Street. We are we just kicked off on Series A. And I'm particularly interested because you say you started, after saying, raising Series A very hard. I mean, you're going to pre-seed, seed, so know kind of. What's particularly hard about, this is one thing you said, this is the hardest thing in Series A. What would you say to this?
We haven't raised a Series A yet, so we've been, our seed, we're a little different. Our seed round was a $15 million seed round, and we ended up raising 30. So maybe we should call it as a Series A. I don't know. But we are planning on doing a Series A to price around, and finding a lead is by far the hardest thing. We haven't, again, found a lead yet, and at least for us, doing all these things, it's hard to find, like, VCs don't have a lot of analysts sitting around on payroll, because that's really expensive, right? So they have the domain expertise usually in a pretty narrow niche. So you have to find a lead investor that has domain expertise in what it is you're doing. We haven't been able to do that. But then they can internally do the diligence and get comfortable with it.
That's what I think is the hardest part, diligence. It's oftentimes the first time the company has to go through a very extended diligence process. And it's like, yeah, I always.
Can't you just give me the money?
I was gonna say, let's have AI price it.
I know, what always takes longer than you think. I tell people 90 days, and they say 90 days, it's just paper, why can't we do it tomorrow? Okay, we'll do it tomorrow.
Well, 90 days after you've done the diligence.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say, at least
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah,
at this
6 to
point,
9
yeah.
months is, a good time.
We have
I think
another
also-
one.
I was just going to say, I think also in the current environment, and again, I don't know your kind of personal like metrics or valuation or anything like that, but generally speaking, if you're raising a Series A now, you probably raised your seed in around 2022 when valuations were really high. So I think a lot of companies have struggled to grow into that valuation and are probably going to raise a flat or a down round at this point, or really have to justify their valuation to their investors who are looking for profitability at this point, are a lot more kind of prudent around unit economics. So again, don't know if that's the case for you, but that's just a lot of what I've been seeing around kind of Series A pricings.
I have 2 questions that are kind of related. The first one is, in the instance where you're able to raise, let's say, convertible debt, you're really small at seed stage, it's very difficult to do that. But suppose you're able to do that at seed stage, is there any benefit to doing convertible debt versus safe notes? And I'm looking at this from the investor standpoint. Of course, the 2 viewpoints would be very different from the entrepreneur versus investor. So from an investor standpoint, is there a benefit of doing one versus the other, given that with convertible debt, you have very little to risk in terms of losing, in terms of paying back, or like Troy was mentioning, in terms of having a default risk. And the second part of this is, and I do a lot of investing with Stanford Angels, we recently had a, let's just call it a rogue founder that basically took money, invested in developing some technologies, and then shut down that company, opened a new company with a different cap table. So how can you protect against these type of
Yeah, I see them
situations?
all the time. Can I take the first one?
Let's give it to you.
Oh, okay. So on the convertible debt, so there was a time I would tell when I counsel investors, I'd say, take the debt, not the safe, because they owe you money. You have to pay it back. The safe, they don't have to pay it back. You're gonna just sit there and wait until there's an exit. And plus, you're taking safe risk anyway. So now I tell them, look, take the safe, because they can't pay you back and something's really wrong. It's either gonna be a home run or nothing. But there's another reason, it's more subtle. And yes, you're giving up the interest you would have gotten on the debt, and you're giving up the fixed repayment obligation. But you know what else? When you convert the debt, your holding period for QSBS purposes starts in the day you convert. If you have a safe, you may be able to make the argument, which everybody in this valley does, that your holding period, there's a 5-year holding period for QSBS. The holding 5 years is selling, you get the benefit. You can make the case that your holding period started when you bought the safe. In fact, it even says that in the Y Combinator form.
Right.
So now I've kind of come around and said, it's just the safes, even if you're an investor.
And a safe can have, I was talking to someone earlier, can
It
have
could
a
have.
coupon rate.
It could.
It can have a forced conversion.
Well, then, at some point, it doesn't look like a safe anymore. It's like, yeah.
Right.
Vrinda, did you want to take the second question?
Yes, sorry, remind me of the second question was about this growth founder.
Yeah, when you have a certain company that the founders founded, we funded it, and now they develop technology, belly up. Next company using the same technology but repurposed for something different.
Gosh, that sounds awful. I don't personally have experience in that. I don't know actually a video legal.
Yeah, that happens. And, well, I don't know, it's a long story, but that's a reach of fiduciary duty. That's-
Fraud, isn't it?
Well, that's, yeah, I don't want to say
It's a five-letter word.
It's bad. You know, it's bad. Your founder has, exposure all over the place. I hope it's not one of my clients. No, by the way, they were not advised by counsel. They just wouldn't do that. Now, there is a right way to do that. You're not a slave just because you're a founder. I mean, you can't just say, heck with it and shut it all down. But you can't take IP with you on your way out. You can't take, you can't take trade secrets. You can't take anything like that. And sometimes people, they get the timing a little bit wrong, and they start the new company before they're out of the old company, and then I make a lot of money.
So my question is less about moral hazard, because clearly that is, implicit in this, right? But it's not actionable. So putting moral hazard on the side, legally, is there any protection an investor pool can have in these type of situations?
Well, the law gives you plenty of protection, just the law, fiduciary law. But yeah, you'll have covenants. So the typical set of Series A covenants would provide all sorts of clauses against interested director transactions, and way broader than what you described, like hiring your mother-in-law, paying yourself a bonus, entering into transactions more than a certain amount. So you can protect it with investors will protect it through covenants, but you don't really need to in that case. That's just a clear fiduciary breach. Now, what you can't do is what you're probably thinking is non-competes, non-solicits, and all that stuff. California, that's awful risky.
First of all, thanks for a great panel. By the way, this has got to be the cutest microphone I've ever seen. It's like a little muffin. Question on the crowdfunding. You said you did advertising that got 3 to 5x on return on advertising. What platforms were you able to get this kind of return? Any specific advice on how you did that?
Yeah, we used the first time around an agency called DNA, Digital Niche Agency. And then the second time around, it's a marketing and branding company called Brand New, KNEW. And they each have experience with it, but the platforms were Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn, TikTok, and I think a little bit on Twitter. So it's pretty much all social media. Is that right? Yeah. And so it worked. And they, like I said, they experimented with different ads. Videos always work better than images. So your GIFs or videos. I feel like with the momentum we have, we could potentially raise a Reg A plus where you can go up to 50 million.
50 million.
Yeah. It's almost like going public without going public,
You said brand new, and what was the first one?
Brand new, and then DNA, Digital Niche Agency.
Perfect. Thank you.
By the way, there was another question about crowdfunding here. You said you were surprised.
I mean, there was a period of time where you wouldn't want to crowdfund and then have to go to institutional round afterwards. They didn't get side-eyed by that. But as secondary markets, it's a bit different because it's typically not at the very earliest stages, but later on, often it's because in order to get liquidity for many of the team members. I think Silicon Valley here, we've got a lot of people that are executives within startups, but the couple, both of them are in a startup. You gotta send your kids to private school. You gotta pay your mortgage. You gotta do all these things, and they get into this liquidity trap. If you try to get that liquidity outside of a secondary market and say, go to a company that's going to finance it, you're gonna pay something like 36% interest on that. It's not untenable. So, and you advise about debt as well, but I mean, here in the Valley, you're gonna have to go talk to Hercules. And we know what kind of rates Hercules charges. Where else are you gonna go?
So we definitely want to be valuable to our esteemed panelists here. So first and foremost, a shout out to VC Nest, where visionaries connect and thrive at 567 University. So definitely check them out at VC Nest online. And then also, if we could maybe do a quick shout out for Advantary and for Haynes Boone, and also, who would you like to meet? Silicon Zombies has over 100,000 views a month. So we're getting to a lot of wonderful folks here. So how can our community be helpful to you to pick us up?
Deal flow. We love seeing exciting young companies, and I would be remiss to waste this opportunity holding a microphone in a panel about new methods or different ways to raise capital if I didn't mention that we at Advantary are a venture firm, but we're not a typical venture firm. By typical, that is to say, investing out of a fund. We're investing through SPVs. So every investment we make is syndicated with a specific targeted set of LPs that can really drive value for the company, in addition to our own and our own operating team. So thanks for the little plug there, but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
On my book. No.
That was even more shameful.
No, wait for the movie. No, thanks for having me here. I always enjoy having these conversations. I always learn a lot. It's like having a front row seat, best seat in the house. So thanks again. Again, Haynes and Boone, we're Amlaw 100 law firm. Our office is next door. And I'm here in Palo Alto doing merger growth and venture capital.
He's holding office hours right after.
Yeah, for me, also deal flow. So if you are a founder raising a seed or raising a Series A or thinking about it at some point in the B2B software space, would love to connect with you. If you're an underrepresented founder outside of that realm, always happy to open up my schedule for pitch deck reviews, providing any kind of advice or feedback as well.
Great. I guess all I can say is if anyone wants to be an angel investor in EarthGrid, we're closing around at the end of the month. Feel free to reach out. Otherwise, support us when you see a project coming to your list.
Beautiful. And I want to do a quick shout out to the Codex, who builds web and mobile products. That's NECODEX.com. Wonderful group of folks. And also Primero Negocios, which does all our marketing and growth. So if you build a product or a service and you're looking to get new customers, definitely check them out. And thank you, son, for playing the theme song here. For more of the best brains, make sure to check out siliconzombies.com. And thanks again to our esteemed panelists here.
Morris. Yeah, how you doing? Looks good. Oh, yeah. Well, sweet. Probably the reason I had a good wedding. Yeah, it's good seeing you. How many trucks you got? Yeah. Good to see you. Yeah. And then they just happen in the app. They'll kind of project the ring or the bell, the jingle. The notifications will go out as your driver asks you. Right. The kid would have moved it. Yeah. You could be walking around. You could yeah. So, making fun. I'll tell you that. Yeah. I was, you know how we are. Right. I will guide you back sharp to dog wash. Or dog wash. And it's community driven, it's providing and building value and differentiation.
But then there are five benefits of the hedge funds. So we are now putting 5%.
Do you work here?
No.
Yeah,
No. We hosting the podcast.
Where is it gonna be posted? Is it gonna be somewhere?
LinkedIn is already on LinkedIn.
What is it under? Is it VC Next?
No, it's under Silicon Zombies. Let me
Show me.
Or you can follow Nick Larson.
Look, if you go to LinkedIn, where
You go to Nick Larson.
Oh, Nick is the guy that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you will see the report here.
I got you. Where do you go? Oh, so you had it live?
Yes, we have it live.
So how long is it gonna stay on?
No time.
So it's under Nick. He had it live. Okay. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll connect with him.
You connect with him and then you see the post. So you just get here.
When you post this, when you're done.
Here on LinkedIn.
It's all on LinkedIn. Is that your primary platform?
Yes.
LinkedIn?
No, we have after we edit the video, we have Spotify. So you get into the Spotify.
Okay. I have Spotify. And YouTube. It's the Silicon Zombies. Yeah, that's Spotify. Okay.
Like you
So
just
then this is gonna be embedded on Spotify.
audio and video.
Then you're gonna get video on LinkedIn.
Video is everywhere. For example, this one.
Then once you go there,
If you get into this,
now we have
What happened? This is Spotify. Spotify has videos.
yeah,
you can bring that in the whole.
Spotify is video.
And then suppose
I've had it for years. I've never seen videos.
No? Oh my god! Yeah, you get the videos there.
That's awesome. Thank you.
AI will automatically send you what are the history-related activities in the area where you are staying, as well as also what the keywords that what are the other things you can use related to history. And then you will be able to control the temperature, the light, everything. Android and Apple was AIQ. Yeah, SIAY.
Oh.